This is Haki FM, Oasis of Justice.
Good afternoon and welcome to Haki FM, Oasis of Justice, where we talk matters law, things to do with the law, and we are here to make sure that we empower you legally in all aspects of life. And today we will be discussing about mother-in-law interference in regards to gender-based violence. And did you know that actually this is an abuse, but most people are not aware of this? But worry not, that's why we are here today. And with me is Millie and Job, but I'll let them introduce themselves officially. Welcome, Millie.
Thank you so much for having me today. My name is Mildred Arum. Most people call me Millie. And I'm happy to be here to discuss this contentious issue. So listener, be here. Sit with us and wait for the discussions.
Thank you, Millie. Over to you, Job.
My name is Judy Moraa, and also delighted to be here.
Thank you. So, mother-in-laws, kwanza, when we come back to the African setup, they are known and they are very cheeky, and at times the cheekiness can move to meanness, and this meanness inakujanga na a lot of mischievous activities and atrocities. They can really become the devil's incarnate if they want to. So, but thank God you're here to discuss, or to enlighten the listener on the types of interferences that at times are meted by the mother-in-law, but the people that this violence or abuse is meted on them, they don't know that it's violence. An example would be, and this is a very common one, like a lady has been married for 2 years, or even worse at times, just a year. Then mother-in-law comes and starts calling the lady barren because there's no evidence of a child. So in this case, you find at times even the husband is not bothered. You get? So at the end of the day, it's the lady that is constantly being harassed by the mother-in-law to get a child. And at times, it's even maybe the man that cannot be able to sire a child. So what do you have to say about this?
Let me start, and I would want to correct a notion, because just look at the way you have approached this issue. It's on a negative side. And I would want to say that most of the times we deal with stereotypes. Because from the word go, even as you've introduced a mother-in-law, everyone would want to believe that they'll always have a devil in the house. So you come into a relationship with arms ready to engage someone that you don't even know. So my thinking is that the conversation has to be balanced, and we have to approach a mother-in-law with a bit of neutrality and objectivity, so that to allow for a relationship to grow. Because it's not always that you'll find that a mother-in-law will have all these negative aspects that you speak about. Yes, there are extremes, but I would say that a majority of mothers-in-law are okay.
I actually want to differ slightly. Anyway, mother-in-laws, of course, they are good people because they both, and the husbands and the boyfriends that the ladies are enjoying out here. But we have situations, and most of the situations are that mother-in-laws have been having issues, and especially if you're, and as just said clearly, that you've been in that marriage for a year, and you've not been able to bear a child. So most of the time they don't ask who is the problem. They automatically say it's the lady. So those are the concerns that probably has brought this bile between mother-in-laws and daughters-in-laws, because you feel they sort of protect their sons and forget that this daughter too, it's someone else's daughter. And of course, the situation of having a child is between the two. And of course, there are certain, tests probably at the medical level that they need to undergo to ensure that, or just define who is the problematic in that regard. And that's why most of the time, even when you go to the hospitals, you'll realize, they're being told, come with your spouse, so that now we can tell who is, faulty in that regard for medical processes to take place. So in as much as Moraa is saying you come in, of course I agree with him that you come in with, an open mind and ready to learn, and of course appreciate that mother, because you need to respect them. Mm-hmm. But of course, the parents too and the mother-in-law too needs to be ready, because life is between the two, the man and the woman, or the son and the daughter-in-law. So allowing these children to know themselves, let their love thrive, and of course allow them to just enjoy that family life, because if she was prevented at her time, then even Job will not be here. So I think mothers-in-laws should just allow their children to be.
Okay, thank you, Millie. But to mirror just whatever Job had said, you see, he's saying that it's a notion about mother-in-laws, they are considered evil. But it's not a notion. It's practical. That is what they are. Because most of the times they want to protect their sons, and then there's conflict of interest, especially even in distribution of resources. And worse still, there are sons that have been fooled by their mothers. They have built a house, their own house within the mother-in-law's compound. So in these cases, you find that the wife that has been married in that household has to do house chores in their house, then do house chores still in the mother-in-law's house. And if she fails to do so, then conflict arises. And most of the times you'll find that the husband will be in support of whatever the mother is saying. So in this case, who is to blame? And actually, I believe that's abuse. Because why would someone be doing house chores in both houses against their wish?
Well, I would agree with you to a certain extent. But then the question is, how many people experience this kind of abuse? And remember, you must understand the context, because most of us get married in between the ages of 20 and 30. Okay? So it means there has been a relationship between the boy and the mom for a period of 30 years, actually from conception. Okay? And then here comes a stranger, for lack of a better word, who wants to assume a certain position of control and would want to alienate the family, the mother-in-law, the father-in-law, and the brothers. So there's bound to be a conflict. And my thinking is that as ladies approach marriages, there needs to be some form of emotional intelligence, so that you are able to balance all these relationships and understand the context. Because, for example, as just as I was said, if you've lived with someone for 30 years, they have been doing certain things for you, and then you introduce someone who takes away half, a quarter, or almost everything that you used to benefit from this person, there's bound to be a conflict. So as ladies, as these daughters-in-law who come into marriages, what are we doing to make sure that there's continuity of that relationship, and the mother and the son continue to enjoy the relationship as they used to be? So I think we need to balance it, as I had said. But then there's also the role of the man, because you have two women, one who is your mother, you've lived with for 30 years, and then comes the love of your life. A woman is supposed to live with for the rest of your life. You can't divorce either. All of them are important to you. So my thinking is that in as much as we have all these perceptions and stereotypes against mothers-in-law, then there's the role of the arbitrator, the neutral person who has brought, or who has the interests of both to take care of, to stand in between and make sure that there's no conflict. That would be my take.
And you?
Okay, I agree with Moraa, and I think, not partially to some extent. I know it's the role of the man to, try and pacify the two, beautiful ladies in their lives. But of course, even as the mother-in-law wants, what the society thinks is that when you marry or you get married, you're married to a society. They forget that looking at the law, marriage is between two people, the man and the woman. So these other people come in to support that unit to grow and mature. So even as the mother-in-law wants, and again, when you get married to this lady, you're not marrying a house help. You're not bringing a house help to the home. I know in the African context, you view this lady as an extra hand to help and support, to come and support and help in that particular family. But of course, they also have an opportunity and rights and freedoms to enjoy their lives and that, enjoy themselves as a family. So even mother-in-laws, I think for me, at this point, it's just to call anyone who is listening to us today, if you're a mother-in-law and you want your daughter-in-law to be a slave in your house, they are not slaves. They are people who are coming to help your children start families and become, parents like you. And of course, it's a high time that you allow these children to grow have their own families with very minimal interference, because when it comes to interference, and of course according to the law, it's when you cause problems that prevent this small unit or this sprouting family to be a family, to enjoy their rights and freedoms as a family. And that is why we're here today, to just speak it out and say, of course, parents have, and of course when you look at the daughter-in-law and the mother-in-law, they have very separate, interests, because the wife has very different interest in the son and the boy, and the mother has very separate interests compared to the daughter. So in as much as they have very different interests, to some extent these interests at some point they clash. So it's for them to look at situations where these interests tend to clash and resolve that. So if you're able to pick that as a daughter-in-law, if you know your mother-in-law wants certain things, and if it's in your position and you're able to do that, if she wants someone to clean, it doesn't have to be you. You can, hire a house help for her so that they can do that. And especially most of the time you find it's the mother-in-law is, very out there and saying, I don't want a house help, I want you to come and do the cleaning. So those are the things that I think cause the conflict that we're seeing between mother-in-laws and daughters-in-law. But of course now the men are, torn between protecting the mother and protecting the wives. But again, it's now that emotional intelligence that Job was speaking about that needs to now come into play. As a man, how do you balance the wife and the mother? Don't scold them before each other, because now lack of respect will be another concern. So find a way of managing that so that these people can live together. But of course, women are not slaves. They are there to be companions to your sons. So please, let them just be the companions and not house helps.
Okay, Millie, there's even a Bible verse that is very common, especially during weddings. A man shall leave his home. I don't know hapo mbele inaendeleaje, but it has to do with like you leave your home, you start your own family, and you separate where you came from and your new family. So if there's this separation, then why should a man allow the mother to manage his household? Times like it's even bad that a mother-in-law will come to visit without alerting anyone, because they feel they are entitled to be in that house. So they come and they don't even give a time that they're going to spend there. And not just time they can come for treatment, that we understand. They are not sick. They just come and decide, I will be staying here. So in such cases, can that be qualified as interference?
Okay. So if by the fact that this mom, when she comes to visit, and probably this young couple is living probably in a single room, it depends with the context. And probably when she comes there, she now wants to control everything. The daughter-in-law does not have, an opportunity to just be a woman in her house. And of course, in as much as she's becoming or taking the role of a woman in that house, also respect the mother-in-law, because there are ties that you cannot really, seize or stop, because this husband of yours has some roots. As much as you're leaving your family and starting another family with a different human being altogether, there are those ties that you come with. They're invisible, but of course still there. So it's for us to just appreciate these mothers-in-laws, fathers-in-laws will still come and visit. But what are these things that you need to put in place to ensure that, there's no conflict? I know the issue of coming, probably notifying before you come. And sometimes we've had situations where even mother-in-laws fake illnesses so that they can just come and see what their sons are eating. Because they're saying, oh my God, my son is he's growing thin every day, because now since he got married, I'm not seeing his, weight growing up. So I think either they're not eating well, or probably this daughter-in-law is causing trouble for my son. So I'm going to go fake probably some illness, or probably she could be sick, but then it's within a small period of time they're well, so they decide, no, let me just extend and stay here. So you're there months. You've left your husband back in the village. Go back, let your children also nurture. And of course, if there's need for advice, it only takes a phone call. You don't have to come there and stay for a whole 3 months. Advice can be given, it's good, but of course also allow the children to make their decision. As a parent, of course, you've lived long enough to know what's good and what's wrong. But then these children too, through your advice, they can be able to make a choice that fits both of them, because they're the ones who are living that life. You lived yours, with your husband as a mother-in-law. So please, just let us live with this man without problems.
I'll agree with her 100%. And as you've mentioned, the good book, that it speaks about two people coming together and living their families. So to some extent, that's supposed to speak to independence. And so there should not be circumstances when a parent will want to impose the ideas. For example, an example of what you've given, living with a couple and trying to control what they do. So I think couples will need to be given space to thrive. But again, we also need to understand there's a context, as Mildred has said. Fine, you're supposed to leave your mother and father, but this does not mean that you cut off the relationship. There are relationships that you must maintain, and hence a parent will always be welcome once in a while. But of course, when their time is up, they need to go to the village. And they also need to understand that when they come to that home belonging to their son or daughter, there are boundaries, because that home belongs to somebody else. They can call their shot when they're back in their houses, but when you go to a different context or a home that belongs to somebody else, it means that you have to live by their rules. So to some extent, or I would agree with what Mildred has said. But I'll also go back to the earlier conversation of what I stated. Most of the times, some of the conflicts that we have between mothers-in-law and the daughters-in-law is based on suspicion. Okay, so my thinking is that as we found the families, we need to start with the basics first, because how many times do we involve professionals in our relationships? So for example, how many times do we involve marriage counselors, okay, at the beginning of that marriage, so that you are able to understand how to handle a context, for example, a conflict that is likely to occur either between the couples or even with their relatives. So you come in with a lot of ammunition, whereas the issue that you're supposed to deal with could be dealt with using very simple approaches. So my thinking is that we need to look at the context. We need to look at the supporting mechanisms. Because, for example, we speak about negativity about mother-in-laws, but there's supposed to be a support system in the first place. So, for example, where I come from, before, if there's a conflict between a boy and a girl, or a man and his wife, even before the woman calls their mother, they are supposed to call the boy's mother first, okay? And that is culture, because that is supposed to be the support mechanism for this woman. So there are relationships that you must cultivate for you to have or to enjoy that marriage. But you can imagine if from the onset you have this conflict with mother-in-laws, and I'm not saying that they are all nice. There are some who are very toxic, and at times you would even go to an extent of cutting off that relationship for you as to thrive. But from the time you're founding that family, if you're able to nurture those relationships, it means that even when you have challenges within those marriages, the support systems that are supposed to kick in are basically what you'll be running away from, or what you already have a preset mind that they will injure or they are toxic to your relationship. So it's to think holistically how you approach the marriage or relationship, so that you can find mechanisms of addressing such issues if they occur. Yeah.
Okay, Job, you've said something about counseling. So when couples, before they get married, they usually go for premarital counseling. Do you think there should be something like counseling for mother-in-laws before marriage takes place? Because, there are some mothers, their kids are getting married for the first time. They've never been a mother-in-law before. So they don't even know. They only want what is right for their son. So I think there should be a counseling that should be demanded, in like the way couples nowadays are asked if they attended a premarital counseling. So the parents also should give their certificate to indicate that indeed we went for counseling and we are going to nurture this new relationship. So what's your take on that?
What I know, previously and customarily, when you look at different communities, before marriages took place, we used to have aunties speaking to the girls, and of course the boy child with the uncles, and those mentors, the male mentors in the context. And that was very important because they were able to now appreciate what they are going into, what is expected of them, and how to manage those, politics. So let me just say politics of the mother-in-laws and father-in-laws and that new family that you want to join. So of course counseling is important, but of course not everyone can afford that. So it is important. And I know churches also have those counseling. So it depends within your pockets and affordability. You can go to your pastor, your priest. Although we've had situations where people are saying pastors are the ones who are now even spoiling the marriages more, but that's a discussion for another day. But of course, that is another avenue you can be able to get, counseling from a spiritual point of view. Have your spiritual leader, talk to you, help you appreciate what is this you're entering into. Because, marriage is not an easy ride. It has its ups and downs, and you need to appreciate that if you're going into it, it's a decision you're making. Love may disappear at some point, so those relationships, those nice moments that you've shared are the ones that will keep you going, and of course that support system. If your mother-in-law is so supportive, then you'll be able to get somewhere to run to if probably the boy now decides to bring issues at home, because majorly what we see is that the ladies do not really rush back to their homes. They speak to their in-laws, because it's easier for the husband to listen to their parents more than strangers. So as much as by marriage you are now no longer strangers, but of course there's that blood relation, and of course they tend to listen to their mothers more. And this takes us back to the concern of mothers' boys, mama's boys, where everything they have to ask their mothers. Can you buy a piece of land? Where? No, let me ask my mom where we can get this piece of land from. Or probably she might give us ideas. So those things really cause problems in the house. And I think it's an opportunity for us to just sensitize the listener out here that even as you're having your discussions in the marriage, parents are very good because they have that knowledge. Tunasema wamekula chumvi, and they appreciate what is life. You can get advice from them. They'll always tell you the right thing. Actually, most of the time, if you do not listen to your parents, you end up doing mistakes. But of course, their advice should not be like the gospel truth or what you have to do. Take that advice, internalize, customize it to what you need as a couple, and act on it. So that common front is very important. So counseling is very important. It can be at the church. It can be, yourselves just talking. And of course, what I usually see and what I think sometimes work is this couple sits down prior to committing to the lifetime engagement and discuss and put on the table to know each other. What do I like? What do I don't like? What do I need from you when it comes to my people? And what do you expect from me when it comes to your people? So that at the face of it, as you commence that engagement, we all know that I have to respect Mora's mom. He has to respect my mom. Or these are the limits that you can do what. If it's complaints, please don't complain to me about my mom. Handle it with her. And if at all there's any issue, let it be. It's not like you're reporting. That's one of the things. And of course, just finding mechanisms of resolving that dispute. Because most of the time what we see is that people lament about their mother-in-laws huku nje. So instead of facing the problem, you're rumamongering or gossiping out here. My mother-in-law, my father-in-law this, my mother-in-law this. So it is important, if you have issues with your mother-in-law, find the right platforms to raise those concerns. Usiende kusema sema huko nje, because that will not be helpful. And again, for me, I usually tell myself, if me and my husband, we cannot be able to address or resolve our concern, no one else will help us. So if you cannot solve your problem, hata ulete nani, unless Mungu intervene, it's a gone case. Yeah. So it's for you to appreciate yourselves and agree from the onset that this is how we are going to handle our issues. If you have concerns with the parents, and of course, one of those small things that you can come in and today we are going to visit the other side of the in-laws, so that you can now build, because relationships are built. This is a woman who is being introduced to another woman. And probably now, there's that, when you do psychology, you'll tell there's that attachment. The girls have attachment to their fathers. The boys have attachment to their mothers. So when you try to distort that, there'll always be a conflict. So how do you enter into that relationship and blend, mutate. I don't know if it's mutation or what, but ensure that the man does not lose the relationship they have with the mothers, and of course you join in and enjoy the relationship that they have for the boy and his mother, and of course you joining in as a new person. So it's for you to appreciate that and living, in that context. So counseling is very important. The other thing will be discussing and agreeing. Having that mother-in-law, if she's problematic, find ways of, they're human. And this, as we say in marriage, that the way to your husband is through, Moraa, what is it? Is it through? Through the tummy. It's
But
food,
me-
yeah? So cook nicely is for the man. For the mother-in-law, find what is this thing that this mother-in-law wants. Kama ni pesa ya chama, msukumiage.
Really, okay, there are some things that are more theoretical than practical, and you know it. There are some mother-in-laws, they are very rigid on their ideas and perceptions about a daughter-in-law. At times it could be they just don't like the tribe they're coming from. At times it's how they appear. They feel like maybe someone is too thin or too fat. And these are things you cannot change. So regardless of whatever you do, you try to please them, you try to send them money, you try to shop for their households, but they will never be in agreement with you. And to make matters worse, if you are married to now, what you said,
Mama's boy.
a mama's boy. These are men that cannot think independently. They cannot have independent ideas or
They
independent.
have a processor somewhere. What's processor? The mother.
Yes, you can imagine. So at times it's hard. And in such situations is where you find even a mother-in-law having the audacity to bring in another woman because they believe, okay, in our tribe, I don't mind about your wife, but I've brought you a wife from our tribe. Or I've brought you a wife with this skin color that I like. Or with this body that I like. This one is too skinny. First, I think in the African setup, mother-in-laws, I don't think they like skinny.
The skinny girls.
No, they want them a
The
bit
African
thick.
ones.
Yes. So, these are things you cannot change. So in this case, maybe Job should answer that because
Please tell us.
I don't have that kind of experience, but I think it speaks to the independence of that man. Because at the end of the day, as Mildred had stated, the relationship is between two people, the man and the woman, or the two who've come together in a marriage. And in the first instance, their responsibility is to protect each other's interests without a third party. So by the time you bounce your ideas to your mom or dad, then it means that you have a problem as a person. Okay? So my thinking is that we must also try to bring up a generation of men who are independent. But for example, the example you're giving about a mama's boy, remember if in instances where you have a man who's brought up by a single mom, for example, the relationship is, I would say, different, and there's a lot of trust that goes with the mother. Okay, and in such circumstances, you'll find that they'll always want to bounce their ideas back to their mothers. But at the end of the day, what matters is a relationship, or the relationship that's supposed to be between the man and the wife. I would also want to speak about the counseling that Mildred has spoken to before. And personally, I have a problem with the way we do counseling. Okay, because the question I usually ask myself is a priest a qualified counselor? Okay, if your field is theology, kindly stick to that. Okay, when you want to get into a marriage, let's go to a proper counselor. Okay, let's discuss our issues with people who are properly qualified. Because when you go to your priest, I think the extent that they are not able to get you to. Okay, there are certain realities that they'll not speak to, and if they must speak, then they'll always refer to a deity, God, as opposed to speaking about the real things. So my thinking is that we just have to up our game in terms of how we do premarital counseling, because it's serious. You're getting into a lifetime engagement with someone, and hence the counseling has to be professional. But again, we also have some other forms of counseling. So for example, where I come from, before a lady gets married, they'll get introduced to the family. the man, and you'll have all the aunties, the women coming together. So besides the eating, they'll of course have a sitting where they'll discuss issues around the marriage. So that's also another way of support. That's another support system, and to me, it looks like counseling, where the lady. Okay, I'm not privy to the discussions there, but I suspect you're taken through what it means to be a wife, what it means to be a daughter-in-law. The women from that clan will definitely tell you what they expect, what are their standards and such like things. And if you find that you're comfortable with that, then you can go ahead and marry their boy. So these conflicts not just happen, okay? At times you can even see the red flags, but then you choose to ignore. I also ask myself, because I've never been to one, what happens during bridal showers? My thinking is that you'll bring in a counselor or someone who speaks to those issues, okay? And if, for example, you bring in a professional, then they are supposed to help deal with some of these issues. So there are so many mechanisms of helping this woman to deal with the other, or helping the man to deal with the wife or the mother, and standing in between and ensuring if there's a conflict, then all of them are well protected. So the systems are there. The question is, do we utilize these systems? Are we objective enough? Are we independent enough? Am I able to stand as a man and say, this is my wife, I have purpose to leave her for the rest of my life, I'm investing with her, I'm having kids with her, and so this is the boundary that I must create. My mom, my dad have lived their life, so to what extent do they come into my relationship? To what extent do I consult them? Because consulting must happen. I trust them, I've lived with them for 30 years, so I will consult. They are wiser, in quotes. Okay, but to what extent are they allowed to interfere or help us make decisions if they must?
Okay, so I think I have identified the root cause of the problem of mother-in-law interference at times. Like Job has said, there are these counselors, quote unquote, in forms of aunties and women in that particular clan. But supposedly, you're coming from a different tribe or a different clan. And there's some communities that believe when a woman gets married, ati anakuwa mke wa ng'ombe. Kwanza that title is so bad. Mke wa ng'ombe. So meaning you have to stay at home for your in-laws to analyze your character, to analyze if you can work hard. And even worse, in baby showers. When you go to such setups, most of the women there are usually married, but the kind of advice they give, is it relevant? Because at times they'll give advice based on their experiences. You'll find someone telling a girl that is going to get married, hey, kama anatupanga socks kwa mlango, usimkubali aendelee na hiyo tabia. You get. So in short, you're teaching this lady violence from the word go. So I think even in these traditional marriages, or maybe the baby showers, like Job is saying, there should be a counselor, like someone that has studied marriage, someone that is in a position to give advice. Or I think that's the problem. And even the mother-in-laws, please, if you can get somewhere where they can go for counseling, even better, because they need the counseling more. And now to Sasa, the interference bit. So to what extent do you think interference can become abuse? Or just to what extent can you report the interference? Because at times it gets out of control.
Yeah, of course, as I said earlier, is that interference, for it to now be interference, it means it is now threatening, the life of that particular unit that is being initiated, that marriage. So any point where you sit and you feel that whatever is happening, whatever mother-in-law is doing, is threatening your relationship with your husband or with your wife, then that becomes interference. So as you've clearly said, most of the time you find mother-in-laws now trying to bring in another woman because either you've not had a child, or probably you're not what they wanted. So that's interference, because previously, kitambo, that's when parents could choose a spouse for you, but these days it is your sole responsibility. Uambie ni huyu ninataka, and that's it. They're supposed to respect that. They can give you advice before you commit. If you listen, well and good. If you do not and you still want to commit your life to this other person, and I remember, I know my mom usually says, ukichagua hiyo ndio hiyo ulichagua, kuna kubadilisha. So just know this is what you're bringing and there's no turning back. So advice is good and let them listen. So interference, and you find sometimes the mother-in-law now probably instigating even their sons now back at home to come and evict you from that house. Kwambi utahama huku. So matusi imekuwa. So it can be physical, it can be emotional, so it depends. So if you feel emotionally drained because of what your mother-in-law is doing, then you can seek redress. The Act is very clear. The Prevention Against Domestic Violence Act is very clear that you can go to court and get orders, that the court can give orders to prevent this mother-in-law from interfering or excessively interfering with your relationship with the son or with the daughter. So that is very and we are happy that the law was created, because previously there was none. And you could suffer these injustices without any recourse. But right now there's a law, and if you are a daughter-in-law out here or a son-in-law out here who is being frustrated by a mother-in-law, please enda police station, report to your mom. Ambiwa kae kwake achunge boma yake, ache watoto waendelee na maisha yao, because I mean they are now grown ups. In as much as to our parents we're always kids. Unfortunately, I don't know, fortunately or unfortunately. So it could be 40 years or 35, but your mom will always atakusemanga mtoto wangu, utanisumbulia mtoto. So, but you're now a father and you're someone's, dad, so, or mom. So it is important that these parents stick to their lanes. Advice, yes, but don't interfere. And when you interfere extremely, there's a law that now protects family units, and with justifiable reasons and justified grounds and reasons, you can always seek redress and the court will give you remedies. Ambiwe usionekane mita 300 kwa hii boma. Hata kama ni simu, limited phone calls, and please salamu tu isikuwe inapita salamu.
And the other question would be, like, will the man agree? Like, what man will even help the wife report their mother to the police because they interfered with their marriage? Like, would you agree to that? Like, would you help in reporting?
Hapo kuna shida. It's almost impossible. But again, I would also want to flip it. Mm-hmm. What would you do if you are a mother-in-law who has a toxic daughter-in-law and you feel that you have the need to protect your son? Okay? Because you cannot watch your son, who is, let's say, a weakling, getting destroyed.
Where are these weaklings?
So, kama mwanaume hajui kujitetea, the mother becomes the backup. So, but my thinking is that culturally it might be hard for you to support your spouse to report your mother to the police station. So that is where you stand in between. Okay, you don't allow the situation to escalate to a situation to an extent that you'll have to go to the police. So that is where you decide, this is the boundary. My mom, this is the far that you can come. My wife, this is the far that you can go. And if need be, do you have to live in the same compound? Mm-hmm. You can live away. There are so many measures that you can take to make sure that there is a clear separation or a gap between the two. Okay, so just find ways of making sure that they do not meet if they're that hostile to each other. Keep away, make sure that there is no conflict between them, because there is no way I'm going to report my mom to the police station or even support my wife to do that. And remember, it also comes with other consequences. Culturally, even though I don't believe in some of those things, what does it mean to report your mother to a police station? Okay, where I come from, we don't even have this issue about a mother-in-law. Your mother, your spouse's mother is your mother. Your spouse's father is your father. Mm-hmm. You are their son. Okay, so the in-law thing is an introduction. Is I would not want to call it Western. Western, of course. But that is your parent, and you ought to treat them the same way that you treat your own biological parents. So that will not happen for me. So just find a way of keeping them apart if the conflict is that that big.
Yeah, and of course, even as you're seeking the redress, it's going to be a last resort, because when you go to court with a parent, it leaves a lot of, a very indelible harm that may take another century for you to, remedy that. So even as the law is clear, and of course we're encouraging people to use the law if and when the interferences are now physical and very harmful and, threat to your life. But of course, ADR is usually the best mechanism. Do alternative dispute resolution mechanisms. Find mechanisms of, resolving within that family context. Call each other to the table. Have a round table and of course do it respectfully, because these are still parents. They gave you a daughter as a wife or as husband. And of course, as Moraa said, you need to respect them. In our culture, they're still parents, and of course, work on your power, your respect. But of course, you don't have to agree with them in everything. Differ but respectfully, and be assertive. And what I can say is that to the listener, if you're in a marriage that probably has these experiences, just have a united front with your husband, because that usually helps. And unfortunately, kama uko na mama's boy hapo iko shida, jaribu kuongea naye akuna united front na wewe, ndio at least when the mother-in-law ama father-in-law amekuja na some those things that are trying to threaten your situation, you can always say, yes ma'am, we agree, we've taken your advice, we are going to retreat back into our chambers, discuss it internally, internalize what we want, and see what makes or what fits for us, then make a decision. But of course, we are promising you we will do what? We'll take into account your advice as a parent, because we respect you. But now respectfully, hataona tu vitu zimefanyika, but of course you respected them, so don't insult. Hata kama ni mbaya, wachana na ubaya yake, because they are still parents. Hata kama ni wazimu, they are still your parent. Respect them in that regard, but just know, yes, we will. Hata ukiwaita meeting, just go for the meeting. It doesn't harm. Go listen. But again, the most important thing is the two people, the husband and the wife. So if you have a united front, I don't see where mother-in-law atakuwa na interference hivyo. Mjenge mbali, akiwaambia mjenge hapo ushago, because you'll visit, mtakaa kwa nyumba yao. Jenga hapo kajumba kadogo ile ya temporary. Mkifika ushago, mnaenda kuwatembelea hapo, and at least making frequent, because for me I know this mother-in-law or father-in-law could be having a perspective or a stereotype, as Moraa had put it initially. And this stereotype can be amended because probably aliambiwa, ama alisikia, ama alikuwa tu anasema, ama alipata premonition, akaona kwa ndoto akasema your son is getting married to a bad person bila kukuona. So that thing already has removed the objectivity. So how do you work towards building that relationship? Because that is what is called upon us. You're leaving your family, going to a very totally strange family. Even your husband, siti mlikuwa mnajuana, but you build that relationship. Ukajua natupanga socks, ukamwambia by the way, hizi socks please usikuwa natupanga hapa, ama akitupa unamleta tu polepole, ile mtembea kwa nyumba, unamwambia can you help me pick that next time atajua. And if you do that polepole, utamwambia, because utapata mwanaume pia hataki kuambiwa. So but the way you take them and you handle them in those situations, they'll start appreciating that this is what my woman doesn't want, this is what my man doesn't want, and they're able to change. The same for kids. So for me, I think mother-in-law, daughter-in-law relationships can be mended. It's only for you to identify what the problem is. Pengine anakasirika because since you got married, the son has stopped sending small cash back in the village. So anaona ulikuja ukachukua pesa yake, and she feels entitled because alilipa shule, amemlea, and she feels my son needs to take care of me. And especially when you come from a family probably wenye wazazi hawakusoma sana, pengine ama hawajajiweza sana, walisoma lakini maisha haikuwapeleka vizuri, iliwachapa character development kidogo. So what do you do? So at that point unasema fine, it's okay, balance your finance and decide probably every month we'll be doing 1 2 3 for our parents. Ama kama ni alternately, what do you do to these parents so that you can appease those spirits? Because if they're not appeased, that's when we're seeing this conflict. So identify the root cause. Why is this mother-in-law, father-in-law against me? Then address that, and I believe marriages will be very beautiful. We'll still have, that landing space where if your husband akileta shida, you have somewhere to run to.
And I also think if you don't find love, then don't force it.
Yeah.
So if you're dealing with toxic parents, you can just move on and be fine with it. Because there's no need of trying to appease people who will not appreciate you.
Yeah.
Okay? So if your daughter-in-law, you come into a relationship, and no matter what you try, it's not working. So you don't have to cut off the man from that relationship, because that is his family. But again, you don't have to, work extra hard to appease people who don't appreciate you. So just know your boundaries, analyze your environment, and make a decision that favors you. Love yourself first. Yeah, I don't think. From a cultural perspective, the people speak about curses and such like things. But if it doesn't make sense to you, move on. Why wait to be abused in a relationship where you have an opportunity to move on? So it all calls for emotional intelligence and balance. And for a man, by the time you bring in a lady into a relationship, you already know your family very well. You've lived with them for 20 years, for 25 years, for 30 years. Okay? You know your mother very well. So by the time you bring in somebody else, knowing very well there's likely to be a conflict, what are the safeguards? You don't want to bring somebody's daughter into your house to make it, to
punishment.
To punish them or to make it problematic for them. Just have the right safeguards. And at the end of the day, it is about you and that woman who you've brought to your house to be your wife, or who's joined you to be your wife or the mother of your children. You need to protect her in the first instance, even before. Now, the moment you bring in a wife, your parents will become a third party. Okay? And that is the reality. So whatever little perks you're taking to them will have to be subdivided between the two. How do you balance those relationships? It all boils down to the man and the decisions that you make. Yeah.
Thank you so much. To our listener, I hope this was extremely, extremely informative. If you have any issues with your mother-in-law, do not let it or allow it to get to that point where you have to report them. If you have an issue, you can send it on our WhatsApp line, which is 0799 387 613. For more of this podcast, please continue streaming www.hakifm.or.ke. Then you can follow us on our social media platforms. On Instagram, we are at Haki FM1. Facebook, Haki FM1. Then you can like our Facebook fan page. It's Haki FM fan page. And also you can find us on Twitter at Haki FM1. And please do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.
This is Haki FM, Oasis of Justice.